What happens when a Hollywood legend faces a host who isn't afraid to ask provocative questions? This confrontation on The Lorraine Kelly Show became one of those moments that stunned audiences and took over social media. No one in the studio, either the audience, the producers, nor Lorraine herself, was prepared for what unfolded. This wasn't just a conversation about a new film. It was a battle of principles, dignity, and respect that left everyone speechless. Denzel Washington, a two-time Oscar winner known for his charisma, depth, and unwavering integrity, appeared on The Lorraine Kelly Show to promote his latest film, a drama about the fight for justice in modern America. But what began as a routine promotional interview quickly escalated into a tense confrontation that went down in television history. Let's dive into this story that had the world talking. The studio of The Lorraine Kelly Show in London sparkled under bright spotlights. Soft light reflected off the glossy floor, and a subtle tension hung in the air as the live broadcast approached. The audience, mostly female, buzzed with anticipation. Denzel Washington, one of Hollywood's most revered actors, was about to take the stage. Cameras hummed, operators checked their angles, and producers and headsets coordinated the timing. Lorraine Kelly, smiling and energetic, sat behind her signature desk, holding her notes. Her pink blazer contrasted with the warm tones of the studio, and her trademark friendly smile promised a light, engaging conversation. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest today," Lorraine announced as the show's music swelled and the audience erupted in applause. "An Oscar winner who needs no introduction, Denzel Washington." Denzel entered the studio with a confident stride. His navy blue suit fit perfectly, and his calm yet commanding charisma filled the room. He waved to the audience, flashed a warm smile, and took a seat across from Lorraine, crossing his legs. The audience clapped even louder, some standing in excitement. Lorraine, beaming, extended her hand in greeting, and Denzel shook it with a slight nod. "Denzel, it's so wonderful to have you here," Lorraine began, her voice brimming with enthusiasm. "Your new film, Shadows of Justice, is already generating a lot of buzz. Tell us about it." Denzel leaned back in his chair, his expression relaxed but his eyes keenly observing Lorraine. "It's a story about struggle," he replied, his deep voice steady yet passionate. "About how an ordinary person can challenge the system when they believe in justice. I'm proud to be part of this project." The audience hummed with approval, and Lorraine nodded, her smile widening. But a fleeting glint in her eyes hinted at a shift in tone. Behind the scenes, producers exchanged quick glances, sensing that Lorraine was about to steer the conversation into unexpected territory. "That sounds powerful, Denzel," Lorraine said, glancing at her notes. Her voice remained friendly, but a trace of sarcasm crept in. "But you know, some people say your roles, how should I put it, always hit the same note. Heroes, fighters for justice, noble souls. Aren't you tired of that image? Maybe it's time to try something new." A hush fell over the studio. The audience, which had just been cheering, froze. Some exchanged surprised looks. One of the camera operators flinched slightly, as if sensing the shift in atmosphere. Denzel narrowed his eyes, but his face remained calm. He leaned forward slowly, resting his hands on his knees. "The same note?" he repeated, his voice low but carrying weight. "Lorraine, I play what resonates with me. What matters? I'm not chasing variety for variety's sake. My roles reflect what I believe in." The audience murmured quietly, some nodding in agreement. But Lorraine didn't back down. She leaned back in her chair, her smile sharpening, almost challenging. "Oh, I understand, Denzel. But some might say that actors of your caliber hide behind those roles. You play heroes, but in real life you shy away from tough topics. For instance, why do you so rarely speak out on political or social issues? Those are important questions, aren't they?" The silence in the studio became almost palpable. Tom, the co-host sitting beside Lorraine, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He tried to smile, but his eyes betrayed his unease. A producer backstage whispered urgently into a headset, but Lorraine seemed oblivious, her focus locked on Denzel. The audience waited, holding their breath, as some began pulling out their phones, sensing that this moment could go viral. Denzel took a slow breath, his fingers clenching into fists before quickly relaxing. His face remained composed, but a spark of anger and frustration flickered in his eyes. "Lorraine," he began, his voice steady but sharp as a blade. "I'm not hiding. I do what I think is right. My films speak for me. If you want to talk politics, I'm not opposed, but I'm not here to play your games." Lorraine raised an eyebrow, her smile now openly provocative. "Games? Oh, Denzel, these aren't games. The audience wants to know who you really are. You're not just an actor, you're an icon. But don't you think icons have a duty to speak louder? Or is it more comfortable to stay in your safe zone?" Tom, the co-host, tried to intervene. Lorraine, maybe we can get back to the film?" His voice trembled, his eyes pleading with her to stop. But Lorraine waved him off, as if dismissing a fly. The audience began to react. Some whispered, others huffed in indignation. A woman in the front row covered her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. The cameras hummed, zooming in on Denzel's face, capturing every nuance of his expression. The producers backstage exchanged panicked looks, one of them waving frantically, signaling the operators to stay focused. Denzel leaned closer, his gaze steady and unyielding. "Lorraine, let me make something clear," he said, his voice deeper, laced with steely resolve. "I don't owe anyone proof of who I am. My work is my voice. If you think I'm avoiding something, that's your opinion. But accusing me of hiding is unfair. And you know it." The audience erupted in applause, though not unanimously. Some nodded approvingly, while others looked uncertain, waiting for Lorraine's response. Lorraine, however, didn't flinch. She crossed her arms, her smile now cold and defiant. "Unfair? Denzel, the audience has a right to know. You avoid political commentary when the world is burning. Isn't that hiding? You could use your platform to change things, but instead, you choose to play heroes on screen. Isn't that hypocrisy?" The word hypocrisy hit like thunder. The studio fell silent. Tom, the co-host, buried his face in his hands, his cheeks flushed with embarrassment. The woman in the audience who had covered her mouth earlier now pulled out her phone and began recording. The cameras zoomed in closer, capturing the slight tremble in the corner of Denzel's lips. A producer backstage whispered frantically into a headset. "Lorraine, stop, this is too much." Denzel stood slowly from his chair. His movements were deliberate, but every gesture radiated power. He adjusted his jacket, his eyes never leaving Lorraine. "You're calling me a hypocrite?" His voice was quiet but carried the weight of a storm. "You sit here in your cozy studio and accuse me of not meeting your expectations? Do you know what I do off camera? Do you know how much I give to people, to organizations, to communities? You know nothing, Lorraine." The audience erupted, some clapped, others shouted words of support. But Lorraine didn't back down. She stood, her hands pressing into the desk, leaning forward as if challenging him. "I know the audience wants the truth, Denzel. And I'm here to get it. If you're so principled, why not speak out openly? Why not take a stand when it matters?" This was the point of no return. The studio buzzed with tension, the air heavy as if a storm was about to break. Denzel stood tall, his posture unyielding, but a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes reminded everyone that he was not just an icon but a human being. The studio of the Lorraine Kelly Show was on the brink of chaos. The air thrummed with tension, and the spotlights seemed to burn brighter, amplifying the drama of the moment. Denzel Washington stood by his chair, his posture radiating strength, but his eyes betrayed a faint shadow of vulnerability. Lorraine Kelly, undeterred, leaned into the desk, her gaze sharp as a blade. The audience was frozen, some held their breath, others frantically recorded on their phones, sensing that this moment would go viral. The co-host, Tom, looked as though he wanted to disappear, his fingers trembling as he tried to speak but found no words. "You talk about truth, Lorraine?" Denzel's voice was low, almost a whisper, but each syllable cut through the air like a knife. "You think you can sit here and judge me? Throw around the word hypocrisy and expect me to justify myself? Lorraine lifted her chin, her smile cold and almost mocking. I'm not judging, Denzel. I'm asking the questions the audience wants to hear. You dodge answers. If you're such a champion of justice on screen, why don't you do it in real life? Why not use your voice when it's needed? The audience split. Some clapped for Lorraine's boldness, others murmured in disapproval, siding with Denzel. A woman in the front row, who had been filming earlier, whispered to her neighbor. She's gone too far. The camera operators scrambled to adjust their angles, zooming in on Denzel's face, his clenched jaw, his eyes burning with quiet fury. A producer backstage, a man in a black suit, waved his arms, signaling Lorraine to stop, but she ignored him, her focus locked on Denzel. You want to know why I don't shout about every issue on every corner? Denzel took a step forward, his voice rising but still controlled. Because I believe in actions, not loud words. I support people, communities, organizations you've never heard of because I don't do it for the cameras. You want to show, Lorraine? I'm not here for that. Tom, the co-host, finally mustered the courage to intervene. Lorraine, maybe we could talk about how the film was made? His voice quivered, his eyes pleading with her to change the subject. But Lorraine shot him a quick glance, as if to say, Stay out of it. Denzel, this isn't about a show, Lorraine replied, her tone sharpening. It's about responsibility. You're an icon, but icons have a duty. You can't just hide behind your roles and expect people to respect you for that alone. The word hide hit like a slap. Denzel froze, his fingers gripping the back of the chair so tightly his knuckles whitened. The audience gasped, sensing a line had been crossed. A woman in the third row covered her mouth, her eyes welling with tears, not from sadness but from the intensity of the moment. The cameras zoomed in closer, capturing the slight tremble in the corner of Denzel's lips. The producers backstage were no longer just panicking. One threw his headset onto the desk and rushed to the director, whispering, This is a disaster. Denzel exhaled slowly, his shoulders squaring, his gaze harder than ever. He released the chair and took another step toward Lorraine, his presence filling the studio like a force of nature. Lorraine, he began, his voice calm but vibrating with power. You don't know what it's like to be me. You don't know what I've seen, what I've been through, what I've given. You sit here and throw accusations because it boosts your ratings. But let me tell you something. My responsibility isn't to you or your audience. My responsibility is to the people who believe in me, who see themselves in my roles, who find hope in my films. You want to call that hiding? Go ahead. But I'm not going to dance to your tune. The studio erupted in applause. Some audience members stood, shouting words of support. Yes, Denzel! And, tell her! But Lorraine didn't back down. She opened her mouth to respond, but Denzel raised a hand, silencing her. I'm not done, he said, his voice louder but still dignified. You want to talk about duty? Then let's talk about yours. You use this platform to tear people down, to create drama where there is none. That's not journalism. That's not truth. That's a circus. And I'm not a clown. The words struck like lightning. The studio fell silent, save for the hum of the cameras and the click of microphones. Lorraine, for the first time in the broadcast, looked rattled. Her smile vanished, and her eyes darted, searching for a response. Tom, the co-host, sat with his face buried in his hands, as if afraid the studio might explode. The audience was divided. Some cheered for Denzel, others whispered, shocked by his bluntness. The woman with the phone in the front row kept filming, her hands shaking with excitement. Denzel turned to the audience, his expression softening but still resolute. I'm not here to justify myself, he said, addressing the crowd and the cameras. I'm here to remind you that every one of us has the right to be who we are. Don't let anyone make you feel like you're not enough because you don't meet their expectations. Live by your principles. Do what you believe is right. And don't let anyone, not talk show hosts, not anyone, tear you down for it. He turned back to Lorraine, his face calm but his eyes blazing. I'm done, he said quietly but firmly. Then he turned and walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing loudly on the glossy floor. The security guards at the door parted in confusion, unsure whether to stop him. The studio descended into chaos. The audience clapped, shouted, some cried. The woman in the front row lowered her phone, her eyes filled with tears but a smile on her face. Tom, the co-host, finally lifted his head, his face pale. Lorraine stood behind the desk, her hand still on its surface, looking as though she'd lost her bearings. The producers backstage were in a frenzy, shouting into headsets. Cut to commercial! Cut to commercial now! The cameras hummed, trying to keep up with Denzel as he disappeared backstage, leaving the studio in stunned silence. Lorraine finally sank into her chair, her face a mix of confusion and anger. She tried to smile, but it was strained. Well, that was unexpected, she said to the audience. We'll be right back after the break. The screen faded to black, but the moment was already captured on dozens of phones. Clips began spreading across social media before the show even ended. Hashtags #Denzel vs. Lorraine and #Denzel walks out trended on Twitter, and snippets of his speech were quoted in news outlets worldwide. The clash between Denzel Washington and Lorraine Kelly became one of the most talked about moments of the year. Some criticized Lorraine for crossing a line, using her platform for personal attacks. Others argued she had the right to ask tough questions, given Denzel's status as a public figure. Denzel himself didn't comment on the incident, but his speech on the show inspired thousands to share their own stories of standing up for themselves under pressure. Lorraine's reputation took a hit. Some accused her of unethical behavior, while her supporters defended her provocative journalism. The Lorraine Kelly show lost some viewers but also saw a spike in ratings due to the moment's virality. Denzel, meanwhile, only solidified his reputation as a man of principle and dignity. What do you think? Was Denzel right to walk out? Did Lorraine have the right to ask those questions? Who do you think was in the right? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to catch more stories that make us reflect on respect, principles, and the power of staying true to oneself.